You have no idea what you're capable of. And I don't mean that in the cheesy motivational poster way. I mean it literally. Right now, there are things you believe you're simply not built for. You're not disciplined enough. You're not smart enough. You're not talented enough. You're not confident enough. Maybe you look at someone who's incredibly successful and think, that person is different. They are not. They are just a human being who spent an absurd amount of time becoming good at something. And that's what makes potential such a terrifying idea. Because if you genuinely believe you have potential, then you eventually have to confront the possibility that the life you're living right now is nowhere near what you're capable of. And that's uncomfortable. It's much easier to believe you have a fixed limit. I'm just not that type of person. I'm bad at math. I'm not athletic. I'm terrible socially. I'm not creative. These statements feel harmless, but sometimes they are just excuses wearing the costume of self-awareness. Because you don't actually know that you're incapable. You know that you're inexperienced. There's a difference. Imagine taking a 5-year-old kid, putting a basketball in his hands, watching him miss every shot, and deciding, well, clearly he's not an athlete. That's ridiculous. Yet adults do this to themselves constantly. They try something 3 times, suck at it, and immediately turn the result into an identity. But being terrible at something in the beginning tells you almost nothing about where you could be after 5 years. That's the part people underestimate. Human beings are ridiculously adaptable. Your brain changes through practice. Your body adapts to stress. Your skills compound. Your confidence grows from evidence. You can take someone who is painfully shy, give them years of social experience, and eventually they can become the person who walks into a room and talks to everyone. You can take someone who couldn't do a single pull-up and eventually watch them do things that looked physically impossible to them 5 years earlier. You can take someone who couldn't write a decent paragraph and give them enough practice to become a writer. The beginner and the expert can be the same person. The only difference is what happened between those 2 versions. And here's where it gets crazy. Some of the greatest people we've ever seen weren't born looking like the finished product. Michael Jordan was famously cut from his high school varsity basketball team as a sophomore. Albert Einstein struggled in school in ways that became part of the mythology around his early life. Steve Jobs dropped out of college and spent years wandering through interests that eventually influenced the way he built products. None of these stories mean failure automatically creates greatness. It doesn't. That's another motivational lie. Failure is just failure unless you learn from it and keep moving. The point is that the person you are at 15, 18, 20, 25, whatever age you are, is not some final draft. You're a rough version. And the terrifying question isn't what if I fail? It's what if I actually gave myself 10 years and found out what I could become? Because potential is not some magical number hidden inside your body waiting to be unlocked. Potential is possibility multiplied by action. And most people never get close enough to their potential to even know where their limits are. They quit at the first sign of resistance. They stop when progress becomes boring. They abandon things when they are no longer naturally good at them. They want the feeling of being talented without experiencing the years of being terrible. But look at almost anyone who became exceptional at something. They had a period where they were nobody. Before Cristiano Ronaldo was one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, he was a skinny kid from Madeira obsessed with football. Before Elon Musk became one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world, he was just a guy building companies that could have failed. Before J.K. Rowling became one of the most commercially successful authors ever, she experienced rejection and financial hardship. Before Arnold Schwarzenegger became a global icon, he was a young bodybuilder from Austria with an accent people didn't take seriously. And I'm not telling you these stories because every struggling person is secretly destined to become a billionaire, a champion, or celebrity. Most people won't. That's important. Potential doesn't mean you're guaranteed greatness. It means you don't know your ceiling yet. And there's a huge difference. You might never become the best in the world, but you could become dramatically better than the person you are today. And that alone can completely change your life. You could become strong enough to do things your current body can't do. Skilled enough to make money from something you once did for fun. Confident enough to walk into a room that used to terrify you. Smart enough to understand subjects that currently look impossible. Creative enough to make something that thousands of people actually care about. You don't need to become Einstein. You need to stop assuming you're finished because you're currently average. Average is a starting point, not a life sentence. And here's something even more uncomfortable. Your potential doesn't care about your intentions. You can tell yourself you're going to become disciplined. You can make the perfect routine. You can watch 300 motivational videos. You can fill your notes app with goals. Potential doesn't respond to any of that. It responds to what you repeatedly do. That's why two people can start at almost the exact same level and look completely different 5 years later. One person practices when they feel like it. The other person builds a life where practice becomes normal. One person keeps waiting for motivation. The other person keeps going while motivation is gone. And after enough time, the gap becomes so enormous that the second person starts looking gifted. That's one of the biggest delusions in human achievement. We see the result and call it talent because we didn't witness the accumulation. We see the athlete and not the thousands of training sessions. We see the musician and not the years of terrible recordings. We see the entrepreneur and not the failed ideas. We see the confident person and not the years they spent being awkward. We see the finished statue and forget there was a block of stone underneath it. But here's where I want to take this further, because potential isn't just about becoming successful. It's about realizing that your identity is far more flexible than you think. You can become someone your current self would barely recognize. Think about that for a second. There is a version of you that doesn't exist yet who can handle things that would completely overwhelm you today. A version of you who knows skills you haven't learned. A version of you who has experienced failures you haven't experienced yet. A version of you who has friends you haven't met, opportunities you haven't found, memories you haven't made, and strengths you haven't developed. That person isn't imaginary. They're a possible outcome of what you do from here. And every day, you're voting for one version of yourself or another. Every time you train, you vote for the person who takes care of their body. Every time you study when you don't feel like it, you vote for the person who can rely on themselves. Every time you speak despite being nervous, you vote for the person who isn't controlled by fear. Every time you create instead of consume, you vote for the person who produces something instead of just watching everyone else do it. None of these actions feel life-changing in the moment. That's the trick. Your future is usually built through actions that feel completely insignificant today. One workout doesn't transform you. One page doesn't make you intelligent. One conversation doesn't make you confident. One video doesn't make you a creator. But repeat them for years and suddenly you've created someone who didn't exist before. And that's why I think potential can be both inspiring and terrifying. Because if you genuinely have potential, then you also have responsibility. You can't keep saying, maybe someday. Someday is not a place. It's a collection of todays. And eventually, you have to stop being fascinated by the person you could become and start building them. Because there is another version of potential nobody talks about. Wasted potential. And I think that's one of the saddest things a human being can experience. Not failing, not losing, not being average, but reaching the end of your life and realizing you never seriously found out what you could have done. You had the idea. You had the ability to learn. You had the time. You had opportunities. Maybe you even had talent, but you kept waiting, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the right moment, waiting for motivation, waiting until you were ready. And one day, the future you kept imagining becomes the past you never lived. That's why I don't think the question is, how much potential do I have? That's impossible to answer. The better question is, how much of it am I willing to develop? Because you might not become the greatest athlete. You might not become a genius. You might not become famous. You might never accomplish the ridiculous fantasy version of yourself you created in your head. That's okay. Your job isn't to become some mythical perfect human being. Your job is to find out how far you can push the version of yourself that actually exists. And maybe you'll surprise yourself. Maybe you'll become stronger than you thought, smarter than you thought, more capable than you thought. Maybe the person you currently consider confident will eventually look timid compared to who you become. Maybe the things you currently think are impossible will eventually become routine. You don't know. That's the point. You don't know. And that uncertainty is the most exciting thing about being alive. Somewhere inside you is a version of yourself that you've never met. You don't unlock them by thinking about them. You meet them by doing things your current self doesn't think you're capable of. So stop asking whether you have potential. You do. The more important question is what you're going to do with it. Because potential means absolutely nothing if you never give it a chance to become real.